When, decades later, I walked back into that same school hallway for the first time, smelling of chalk, old radiators, and damp rags, my first thought was not nostalgic at all. It was chilling. If she hadn't kicked me out of class that day, everything would have turned out differently. And yet here I was, standing under a dim lamp that was long overdue for replacement, feeling as if time had decided to come back for what it was owed. But back then in 7th grade, it was just a normal Tuesday. I remember standing by the window, listening to the old wiring humming monotonously in the hallway. My hands were shaking. It's funny to remember now, but I was really scared. I wasn't afraid of getting a bad grade or being yelled at, but that my secret would be revealed. A secret that no one was supposed to know about. Not the teacher, not my classmates, not even the one I consider my friend at the time. "Late again," she said, without even looking at me. Her voice was stern, metallic. Much later, I would realize that it wasn't arrogance I heard in her voice, but fatigue. But at that moment, all I heard was coldness. The literature teacher, Maria Pavlovna, a woman who was all about rules, a woman who was all about logic and discipline and an endless list of requirements, written as if in ink from the last century. I opened my mouth to explain why I was late, but she raised her hand, a sharp movement, as if she were putting an end not only to the sentence, but also to my life. "Go. I don't want to listen. Learn to respect other people's time. And be on time." The class murmured quietly. Someone giggled. And I stood in the middle of the room, clutching my notebook, feeling a fiery lump of humiliation rising from somewhere deep inside my chest. And yet I left, because arguing then, I didn't have the strength. Only on the stairs did I unclench my fingers and remember there was a letter in the notebook. The one I didn't want to show anyone. Short, awkward, but honest. "Mom, it's getting hard for me. You say that everything will work out, but sometimes it feels like we're drowning. I'm trying, I'm really trying, but sometimes it's so scary." And then it went on about how we lived back then. How Mom worked 2 jobs. How she would come home in the evening, quietly put down her bag, and close her eyes as if hiding from the world. How I pretended that my homework was taking a long time so she wouldn't see that we had nothing for dinner again. How I carefully put the coins I found under the sofa into a jam jar. The letter wasn't written for school. It was for a psychologist my mother wanted to take me to see, but we didn't have enough money. She said, "Let's put it off for now." And I just wrote what I couldn't say out loud. And now that letter was lying in my hands, crumpled with red pen marks. Maria Pavlovna had checked the notebooks in advance and apparently decided that there were too many mistakes in my text, without even realizing that it wasn't an assignment. I sat down on the steps and buried my forehead in my knees. And then I heard footsteps. "Did they kick you out?" The voice was familiar. I raised my head. Lyra was standing in front of me. A classmate. The one with whom we sometimes shared a sandwich in the cafeteria if only one of us had money. She knew how to smile even with her eyes, a rare talent. Although once she said something I will never forget. "You know, you talk as if you're trying to be an adult. As if you're hiding something." She hit the nail on the head. I was hiding something? "Yes," I said. She kicked me out. Lyra sat down carefully next to me. "Do you want me to wait? When the lesson is over, we'll go in together." She doesn't yell at me. Maybe she'll soften up. I shook my head. "No, thank you. I'll just sit here." But Lyra didn't leave. And that was strangely pleasant. For a moment, I felt a less acute emptiness. "Are we going after school today?" she suddenly asked. I thought about it. We were going to go to the library, where we could sit for free until closing time and pretend to read so we wouldn't have to go home. "Yes," I replied. "Let's go." She smiled. And at that very moment, the classroom door swung open. Maria Pavlovna came out, looking straight at me. Her eyes weren't stern. They were harsh, almost angry. "Come back and bring your notebook. You'll read aloud." I froze. Out loud? The letter? It's, I swallowed, personal. There is no such thing as personal in our class. There is a curriculum and requirements. "Get up." Lyra turned sharply to her. "Maria Pavlovna, this isn't schoolwork." "Don't interfere," she cut her off curtly. And then something happened that became the first turning point in my life. I slowly got up, slowly walked over to her, took the notebook, opened it. A red pen had crossed out almost the entire letter, leaving comments in the margins about style, spelling, and inappropriate emotionality. And with my heart pounding, I dared to say for the first time in my life, "I'm not going to read this." The silence around us was so thick that it seemed to ring. Maria Pavlovna raised an eyebrow. "What? It's not for you." I exhaled. "It's a letter. For a consultant. My mother wanted to, but then I couldn't continue." The lump in my throat became too big. She stood there, looking at me, and for the first time, something resembling confusion flashed in her eyes. For a second. For a moment. But then her face became stony again. "You'll stay after class. We'll talk." And I decided, no more leniency. If you can't separate your personal life from your studies, I'll teach you how. She turned and walked away. I sat down on the same step. Lyra sat down next to me. "She has no right," she whispered. "So what?" I smiled. "Who's going to stand up for me?" Lyra paused. Then she added quietly, "I will." I looked at her. I wanted to tell her not to, that it was pointless. But I couldn't, because for the first time in a long time, I felt that someone cared about me. After class, she called me into her office. Lyra wanted to come with me, but I asked her to wait in the hallway. Maria Pavlovna was sitting at her desk, leafing through magazines. There was no malice on her face, only fatigue, so heavy that it almost crushed her. "Sit down," she said. I sat down. "You have to understand, school is a system," she began, without even looking at me. "And if everyone starts bringing in personal matters instead of assignments, what if personal matters are more important?" I asked quietly. She raised her head. "More important?" In 7th grade, I felt a wave rising inside me, slow, viscous, burning. "Yes." When I'm at home, I fell silent, but she already understood. Her expression changed slightly. The corners of her eyes twitched, her lips tightened slightly. "Everyone has a hard time sometimes," she said more softly. "But that's no reason to break the rules." That was the last thing I needed to hear, because at that moment the office door swung open, and standing in the doorway was a woman I hadn't seen in 2 years. My grandmother. Strict, fragile, with a face on which every wrinkle was like a trace of a storm she had weathered. I froze. So did Maria Pavlovna. "So," said my grandmother in a dry voice, looking at both of us, "which one of you made my grandson cry?" I tried to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. "I'm sorry," Maria Pavlovna began. "No." Grandmother raised her hand. "Now you listen. We'll talk later." And then something changed in the office. The air became thicker. It was as if invisible levers had clicked, shifting the weight of the world. Because my grandmother, the one who had always been far removed from school, money, status, stepped forward, took a notebook out of her bag, and placed her letter on the teacher's desk. It was old, yellowed. "Read it," she said. "He wrote it to me when he was very young, when his father died, when his mother was in the hospital. We learned to be silent so as not to disturb the adults." Maria Pavlovna opened the letter, and for the first time, I saw her slowly turn pale. But the main thing happened a minute later. She looked up and said, "I knew your father." I felt the world sway strangely. "What?" I gasped. She took a deep breath, as if deciding to confess something she had kept inside for too long. "We went to school together, and I knew you looked like him, but..." She paused. "I didn't think it was you. I didn't know that he was gone." He sat motionless. "So did Grandma. He was my friend," Maria Pavlovna continued. "Very kind, very honest, and always too sensitive for this world." And then she looked straight at me. "Like you." Silence hung in the office. A twist, a turning point, a pause that changed everything. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. I understood only one thing. Something bigger than a school conflict lay ahead. Something connected to a past I didn't know. And at that moment, Lyra looked into the office. "Is everything okay?" she asked quietly. But no one had time to answer because a cry rang out in the hallway. "An ambulance!" Quick! We jumped up. People were running. Someone was crying. And at the school entrance stood my mother, pale, barely able to stand. And I realized, this is just the beginning. I rushed to my mother, barely noticing the faces, hands, and voices flitting around me. She stood holding onto the doorframe, as if it were the last remaining pillar of support in the world. Her face was white, as if everything that could give her color had drained away in a second. "Mom, what happened?" I grabbed her by the elbow. She tried to smile, but the corners of her lips trembled and couldn't rise. I, I came to talk to the principal," she squeezed out. I wanted, I wanted to ask that they stop picking on you. But my head, she didn't have time to finish. Her knees buckled, and I barely managed to hold her up. Grandma rushed over to us, deftly catching her shoulders. Maria Pavlovna stood a little behind, as if hesitating to approach, or not having the right to. For the first time, she didn't look strict. She looked scared. The hallway was in complete chaos. Someone had already called an ambulance. Someone else had started opening the windows, as if cool air could fix the world that had collapsed. When the paramedics carried my mother away on a stretcher, I followed them. But my grandmother put her hand on my shoulder. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "Let the doctor do his job. We'll follow behind." And suddenly, as if amid all the commotion, the world decided to remind us of its existence. Lyra gently took my hand. "I'm with you," she said. Her eyes were shining. She was scared too. I nodded, and only then did I notice Maria Pavlovna standing in the doorway with her hands down. She wanted to say something, but just looked at me, with a look that contained more regret than in all the years I had known her. My grandmother and I were riding the bus to the hospital. I sat with my backpack pressed against me, as if I could hide behind it. My grandmother was silent, and her silence only made me more anxious. "Grandma," I finally began. But Grandma raised her hand without looking at me. "Wait, we'll talk when we get to the doctor. You're already worn out." I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. We passed yards, shops, bus stops, but everything seemed like a painting. Only one thought was spinning in my head. If something happened to my mom, I wouldn't be able to bear it. When we arrived, a young doctor with tired eyes met us in the reception area. He quickly looked through the papers, then looked at us. She was admitted with suspected hypertensive crisis. Her condition is serious but stable. She is currently being administered medication. Grandma seemed to breathe a sigh of relief for both of us. "Can we see her?" I asked. "Later. She needs rest now." We went out into the corridor. I sat down on a plastic chair and lowered my head. Inside, everything was boiling. Fear, fatigue, anger at myself, at school, at the world, and my own helplessness. Suddenly, someone sat down next to me. I looked up and saw Maria Pavlovna. "Al, how are you here?" I was confused. "I asked a colleague to excuse me," she said. "You shouldn't be here alone." She carefully placed a bag of water and some cookies on the chair next to me. "What about Lyra?" I asked. "She went home. Her parents picked her up, but she said she would wait for news." I nodded, not knowing what to say. And she, for the first time, wasn't cold. She was normal, a little confused, and even warm. She took a breath. "Owe you an apology." Grandma looked at her, but said nothing. For many years, Maria Pavlovna spoke slowly, as if each word were a heavy burden. "For many years, I was afraid to see in my students what I saw in your father. He was too talented, too emotional, and too vulnerable. And when I saw you, I didn't want to admit it, because I couldn't bear another story that ended just as tragically." I blinked. "My dad, tragically?" "But," Mom said. I stopped myself. Mom hardly ever talked about him, only that he left early, that he couldn't take it. But I didn't understand what exactly. My heart began to beat faster. Maria Pavlovna clasped her hands. "He killed himself," she said quietly. My world shook. I couldn't breathe. Grandmother closed her eyes and sighed heavily. "I asked you," she said to Maria Pavlovna, "not to talk about it until the time was right." "He had to know," replied the teacher. "He's grown up, and he has to understand that his feelings are not a weakness." He sat motionless. The ground beneath my feet seemed to slip away. "Dad," I whispered. "What?" There was no answer, because at that moment the doctor came out and said, "Can I come in for a minute?" Mom was lying on a white bed, hooked up to an 4, but she was conscious, and when she saw me, her face softened. "Don't you dare." She smiled weakly. Make that face. I'm not dying. I moved closer and sat down on a chair next to her. Mom. I searched for words, but couldn't find them. She touched my hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm too tired. I've been carrying everything on my shoulders for too long. But everything will be fine. I'll manage. Grandma stood silently at the door, watching us. Maria Pavlovna stood behind her, awkwardly, as if afraid to take another step. Mom noticed her. Is this the teacher? She asked. Yes, Maria Pavlovna said quietly. I owe your son a great deal. Mom closed her eyes, as if gathering her strength. He's a good boy, she said. Forgive him if anything. Maria Pavlovna shook her head. No, you forgive me. And there was not a trace of severity in her voice. Only sincerity. We sat there until Mom fell asleep. And when the doctor said we should leave so as not to disturb her, we went out into the hallway. And Grandma, stopping at the window, said, We have to tell her everything. We've kept quiet for too long. I looked up at her. Tell her what? She sighed deeply. Your father, it wasn't illness or weakness that brought him to this. It was circumstances, people, cruelty, and one mistake. One he made when he was exactly your age. The words cut deeper than a blow. What mistake? I gasped. Grandma looked at Maria Pavlovna. She stepped closer. The mistake, she said, was that he decided to hide everything. That he tried to cope on his own. And when there was nothing left to save him, we found out the truth too late. I clenched my fists. I didn't want to bother anyone. I whispered. I didn't want to be a burden. Maria Pavlovna crouched down to look me straight in the eyes. Listen, this is very important. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to keep quiet. I was a bad teacher, but I'll understand if you tell me what's going on with you. And then, for the first time in my life, I said out loud what I'd kept inside for years. About the nights when I heard my mother crying. About the fear that we would be evicted. About the feeling that I was living on the edge of a precipice. About the constant anxiety. About wanting to scream, but not knowing how. When I finished, Maria Pavlovna just sat down next to me, covering her eyes as if she was reliving every word I'd said. Grandma wiped her eyes. All this time you were alone, she said. But now you're not. Do you understand? I nodded. But inside, I still felt empty and hurt. The next few weeks passed in a fog. My mother was treated, and her blood pressure gradually stabilized. I was with her almost every day, sometimes with Lyra, sometimes with my grandmother, sometimes even with Maria Pavlovna, who unexpectedly became different, calm, attentive. She brought books and gave my mother advice on how to recover. For the first time, I thought, people sometimes change not because they are bad, but because they carry other people's and their own stories for too long. At school, people looked at me differently. Some felt sorry for me, others were surprised. But I didn't care much anymore. I learned to look people in the eye. One day, when my mother was getting ready to be discharged, Maria Pavlovna stopped me after class. I want to show you something, she said. We went in her office. She took out an old box. Inside were photographs. In one of them was a smiling boy with unruly hair and a familiar look. My father. He was my best friend, she said quietly. I wanted to be a teacher, just as he wanted to be a writer. But we went our separate ways. And she paused. I blamed myself for his departure. After all, I knew it was hard for him, and I couldn't find the words to help him. She handed me a photograph. You won't repeat his path, she said. I promise that this time everything will be different. I looked at the photo. Tears welled up in my eyes. But for the first time, the tears didn't hurt. Instead, I felt a strange, warm sense of relief. Thank you, I said. I should be thanking you, she replied. You brought me back to who I once wanted to be. And then came the day that I still remember. Mom was discharged from the hospital. The three of us, me, Mom, and Grandma, were walking home. Mom was smiling, leaning on my arm. Grandma said she had bought 2 hot rolls for dinner. Everything was calm, surprisingly calm. In the evening, we sat in the kitchen. The yellow light from the lamp fell softly on the table. My mother slowly drank her tea and said, You've grown up. I thought I was protecting you by not telling you about your father. But it turns out I was depriving you of your past, and probably your strength. I sighed. It was very difficult for me. I admitted. But now it's easier. She nodded. To make it even easier for you, she took a small notebook out of the drawer. These are his notes. I found them recently. I was afraid to open them. I took the notebook. I opened it. Crooked, but lively handwriting. Thoughts, feelings, pages smelling of age. If I ever have a son, I want him to know that being sensitive is not a weakness. It's a gift, but you have to know how to live with it. And most importantly, don't keep everything inside. My hands were shaking. Did he write about me? I whispered. He wrote about the future, my mother said. But he wrote sincerely. I closed the notebook and held it to my chest. And suddenly I realized, I'm not alone. I've never been alone. I just forgot it. Months passed. My mother recovered. I grew stronger. Lyra became more than just a friend. Maria Pavlovna changed her teaching style. Now she listened to her students, sometimes too attentively. And one day, she said to me, "Your father was right. Every child is a whole universe. Thank you for reminding me of that." I smiled, and for the first time without bitterness. I often think about the day she kicked me out of class. At the time, it seemed like the end, that this moment was destroying me. But only later did I realize that sometimes life doesn't hit you to break you, but to put you on a different path. And everything that seemed unfair turned out to be the path to the truth that I so desperately needed. Now, as I stand in the school hallway years later, listening to the faint echo of footsteps, I understand. Sometimes fate takes revenge for you, but it does so not with malice, but by revealing what is hidden, returning what is forgotten, and connecting what has been torn apart. And we grow up, through pain, through truth, through those who once said, "I am with you."